This is a lecture on a progressive philosophy of education through the perspective of John Dewey. Progressivism is a philosophy of education closely aligned with liberal humanism. However, it is its relationship or its conception of the child and the child's interconnection with the curriculum and the need to, what Dewey calls, psychologize the curriculum, perhaps identifies it as a unique philosophical position. Although it is very close to liberal humanism in that it's an attempt to liberate the powers of the child, of the student, to liberate and develop the person's capacity for further experience. So we will explore Dewey's philosophy of progressive education as he has articulated it in an early essay called The Child and the Curriculum, as well as a few chapters from his great book, Democracy and Education. We begin with the nature of the child. From Dewey's perspective, the child is a psychological being in the sense that the child is personal, emotional, subjective, holistic, experiential. That is the mindset, the consciousness of the child. The child lives in a psychological world, which is distinct from the world of the adult mind, which is abstract, logical, ordered, codified, etc. The child is an immature being, an undeveloped being, however, a being with great potential. And we need to, from Dewey's perspective, take into consideration where the child is in terms of their consciousness. So we begin with the child as a personal, emotional, subjective, holistic being. And these quotations from The Child in the Curriculum express that idea of the child as a psychological being. Now, inherent in the child's nature and inherent in human nature for Dewey is the idea of plasticity. That is, inherent in our being is an innate capacity to learn from experience. Plasticity doesn't mean or doesn't imply being plastic, that is, being molded. Plasticity means for Dewey a capacity to learn, and that capacity is innate. It's a capacity as an ability, a power, a potency, a force to learn from experience and to develop from experience. As he writes in Democracy and Education, it is essentially the ability to learn from experience, the power to retain from one experience something which is of avail in coping with the difficulties of a later situation. This means power to modify actions on the basis of the results of prior experience, the power to develop dispositions. This is the idea of plasticity, the capacity, the ability to learn from experience. And this notion is central to Dewey's philosophy. From this perspective, growth development is an ability. It's an innate power to develop. We have each within each of us, and the child has within her an innate power to grow, an innate power to develop. The immaturity means the possibility of growth. And that, as Dewey suggests, that's not an absence of power, but a force present in the child. So the ability, the force to grow and develop, to learn from experience, to develop the capacity for experience, is inherent in the child herself. It's a positive force. We, as Dewey says, we do not have to draw out or induce positive activities from a child. They already exist. Growth is not something done to them, it is something they do. So here we have the idea of development as centered in the child and not an external imposition onto the child. That the child grows naturally. That there is an inherent ability to grow and develop, and that is the nature of life. And therefore, development isn't something done to the child, student. It's something the child does. And this is critical for the progressive philosophy of education, and therefore it is fundamentally child-centered in this sense of growth as an innate power to develop. Yes, growth is inherent in life itself. Life is development, and that developing, growing is life. Translated into its educational equivalence, that means, one, that the educational process has no end beyond itself. It is its own end, and that the educational process is one of continual reorganizing, reconstructing, transforming. A very profound idea. Very insightful and unique idea from Dewey. That the educational process is a process of growth. Its growth is an end in itself, and therefore an education for growth is an end in itself. And that process of being educated is a continual one of reorganization and reconstruction, of the transformation of the capacity to have further experience. Dewey contrasts his approach, his philosophy of progressivism, with two other competing philosophies captured in the phrase "the child versus the curriculum," or what we could call romanticism versus conservative humanism. As we already have seen in conservative humanism fixes its attention upon the importance of the subject matter of the curriculum, that is, the world of human achievement, and as an inheritance, the cultural heritage. And that is the end. Initiation into the human world of achievement is the end or purpose of education. And the subject matter furnishes the end, and it determines the method. The child is simply the immature being who is to be matured through exposure to the inheritance. On the other hand, the romantic view is that, perhaps originating with Jean-Jacques Rousseau's classic work, The Emile, that the child is the starting point, the center, and the end. That the child grows unimpeded, or should grow unimpeded by the cultural artifacts of the adult world, which can distort and narrow the child's growth. that the child basically should be left alone to experience his or her environment, and that growth is natural. So we have two extremes here. On the one hand, we have the child alone to develop, and on the other hand, in conservative humanism, we have the curriculum. This is a juxtaposition between the child and the curriculum. And it's a juxtaposition or a duality that Dewey seeks to unite, to integrate. He seeks to integrate the logical and disciplinary nature of the curriculum with the subjective, experiential, psychologized nature of the child. And he conceives an education for growth as requiring an integration of the child and the curriculum. So Dewey here is seeking not to maintain the duality between the child and the curriculum, but to integrate the child with the curriculum. He does not see them in opposition, as binary oppositions, but as aspects of the same unified whole. And he seeks their unity. There is no gap in kind between the child's experience and the various forms of subject matter that make up the course of study from Dewey's perspective. On the one side is the child, and the other side is the curriculum. And they must be brought together for growth to occur. And the curriculum is a means or a supporting environment for the growth of the child. The subject matter should not be seen as something fixed and ready-made outside the child's experience. We should see the subject matter as an aspect of a single process, just as 2 points define a straight line. So the present standpoint of the child and the facts and truths of studies define instruction. It is continuous reconstruction, moving from the child's present experience out into that represented by the organized bodies of truth that we call studies. The studies, the disciplines of knowledge, are codified experience, logically ordered. They represent the possibilities of growth inherent in the child. That is, all the various disciplines of knowledge, history, literature, poetry, science, mathematics, philosophy, etc. All these disciplines of knowledge are abstracted, logically ordered, and codified expressions of human experience. They are not divorced from human experience. They are living expressions of human experience. However, they are abstracted from that experience. They are logical expressions of that experience. However, they represent the possibilities of development inherent in the child's own experience. However, they are not part of the living experiences of the child as yet. They represent what could be the potentiality of the child as the child grows and develops. In addition, the child's own lived interests, based grounded in their lived experience, are potential growth experiences. They are attitudes toward possible experience, but they are not achievements. So the child is a potential being with interests, with a lived experience, yet unformed, not yet fully formed, rather. But there is a direction inherent in the interest and experience of the child. The felt needs of the child point us in an evolutionary or developmental direction, which have been worked out, codified, and expressed in the disciplines of knowledge. Growth is the development of the capacity for further experience for Dewey. That is, it's not a putting in, it's not a extracting, it's a developmental process of reorganization and reconstruction and transformation of one's ability or capacity for further experience. Is one's capacity for further experience being developed? Is it growing? Or are we stuck in our current state of capacity for having experience? Dewey suggests we are evolutionary beings. The child is an evolutionary being with the inherent power of growth, and that inherent power of growth is the power to develop the capacity for further experience. The problem of directing this capacity for further experience into greater developmental heights is the problem of selecting appropriate stimuli in order to stimulate the reorganization and transformation of that capacity. The key here is that of growth as development, and growth is the reconstruction and development of the capacity for experience. However, growth requires guidance as a process of liberation. We're not molding, we're not initiating, we're not constructing the mind, nor are we letting the mind or the child's native capacities run freely and freely developing. But we are guiding the process of growth. And that is a process of freeing the life process for its own most adequate fulfillment. Development is a process, and that's a process that is guided that needs guidance in order for its direction to unfold in a way that enhances one's further capacity for growth. Therefore, the purpose of education for Dewey, for progressivism, is growth. Growth is education, education is for growth, and growth is the capacity, the heightening of the capacity for further experience. Hence, education means the enterprise of supplying the conditions which ensure growth, irrespective of age. And immaturity, we shouldn't be impatient with immaturity, regarding it as something to be got over as rapidly as possible. We should see the immaturity of the child as an opportunity to direct that child's growth. That direction occurs through exposure to the adult world and the adult mind as represented by the curriculum. However, the adult mind is different from the child's mind. The adult mind is logical, abstract, analytic, synthetic, ordered, conceptual, impartial, objective, principled. That is, the adult mind is intellectual. The adult mind is ordered and abstract. And that is represented in the matured expressions of the mind as it is expressed in the various studies and disciplines of knowledge. The adult mind as expressed in the disciplines of knowledge from the child's perspective seems very disconnected from their experience, seems very abstract, very difficult to access, very unapproachable for the child. Yet, within the adult mind and the expressions of the adult mind is the future of the child, is the future end of the child's growth. It's of fundamental importance to the child, yet the child cannot readily and easily access the life of the mind of the adult. Adult thinking is analogous to map making, and the child's mind is like the map maker's experiential journey into the territory being mapped. That is, the adult thinking, expressed in the disciplines of knowledge, are like maps, codified, logically ordered representation of an experience, whereas the experience of the territory upon which the map is based is something quite different than the map. It's a living, holistic experience. However, having a map as a guide is of great value to one who's traversing the territory. However, the map must be connected to the territory. The map must be seen in light of the actual experience of the journey into the land. This is analogous to the experience of education. The curriculum, the abstract curriculum, provides a map of experience. Yet if we just study the map without connecting it to an experience, then the map remains an abstract and irrelevant document rather than a living symbol that guides experience. The task and the problem of education is to connect the map to experience and to have the map be a living document of human experience, or the curriculum be a living map, a living document of human experience. That will lead to the growth of the student. That is, the logical assists the psychological. It enriches the lived experience and enhances the capacity for experience of the person. It is a way of entering into a rich field, a rich treasure chest of human experience that one doesn't have to relive per se, but one could enter into vicariously and abstractly through the disciplines of knowledge. For example, one cannot relive an historical experience, but one can enter into that experience in the abstract by reading an historical novel or reading history. It's abstract and perhaps disconnected, but it allows, if one can connect to it, a rich field, a rich map through which we can illuminate our own experience and our own capacity for experience. That is the logical, the abstract generalization, the classification of adult knowledge is conceived not as opposed to the process of growth. The logical is not set over against the psychological. It is there to assist the psychological. It is there to guide the developmental process. Therefore, in order for education to be effective, in order for education to result in the growth of the student, the knowledge, the curriculum needs to be psychologized in the sense that it needs to be integrated into lived experience. The teacher needs to reinstate into experience the subject matter of the studies. That is the curriculum. The teacher must restore the experience from which it has been abstracted. It needs to be, that is, the curriculum needs to be psychologized, turned over, translated into immediate and individual experience within which it has its origin and significance. The teacher is concerned with the subject matter of the science as representing a given stage and phase of the development of experience. His problem is that of inducing a vital and personal experiencing. Hence, what concerns him as a teacher is the ways in which that subject may become a part of experience, what there is in the child's present that is usable with reference to it. The teacher is not concerned with the subject matter as such, but with the subject matter as a related factor in a total and growing experience. Thus to see it is to psychologize it. And Dewey concludes, it is the failure to keep in mind the double aspect of subject matter which causes the curriculum and child to be set over against each other, as described earlier. So, we have the psychological, concrete, emotional mind of the child, immature child, and we have the abstract, logical, classified, codified, generalized nature of the subject matter. And the two are disconnected. How do we bring them together? How do we integrate the child with the curriculum? One concrete, the other abstract. The bridge of integration of the child and the curriculum is to psychologize the curriculum. That is to connect it to the lived experience of the child. When we do this, when we connect it to the lived experience of the child, when we psychologize the knowledge, then inherent in that psychologizing of the subject matter is inherent motivation. If the child can see herself reflected, her experience reflected in the subject matter, and relevant to her own experience, and the subject matter, then the interest in the subject matter becomes enlivened. then the child, the student, becomes motivated to engage the subject matter, because the subject matter is seen as a living experience, connected and relevant to their own life, to their own lived experience. And it's in this connection of seeing the subject matter as a living experience, relevant to one's own experience, that is the key to motivation and the key to growth and learning for Dewey. We need, one only learns something when one's motivated to learn it, when one sees a living interest in it. We are fooling ourselves if we think we can generate motivation externally to the experience of the student. Dewey suggests that's completely impossible, that we only learn something when we have an interest in it, and we only have an interest in something when it is connected to our own felt needs, our own problems, our own curiosity, our own lived experience. You don't have to drill and artificially drive. You need to connect the subject matter to the lived experience of the child. This occurs through the design of the environment of the child. The teacher, a part of the pedagogical method, is to design a developmental environment. That is, the teacher is a facilitator of the child's growth through arranging the educational environment to give certain experiences to the child that will lead to growth, that will psychologize the curriculum. For doing this is connected to the design of the educational environment, is connected to the social purposes of education, and in particular to the nature of democracy itself. That is, the educational environment for Dewey, the classroom, the school, should be a living democracy. That is, it should embody and enact the fundamental features of democratic life. And democratic life is that which is most conducive to human development, to human growth. As Dewey writes, a democracy is more than a form of government. It's primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. The extension in space of the number of individuals who participate in an interest, so that each has to refer his own action to that of others, and to consider the action of others to give point and direction to his own, is equivalent to breaking down of those barriers of class, race, and national territory, which kept men from perceiving the full import of their activity. These more numerous and varied points of contact denote a greater diversity of stimuli to which an individual has to respond. They consequently put a premium on variation in his action. They secure a liberation of powers which remain suppressed as long as the incitations to action are partial, as they must be in a group which in its exclusiveness shuts out many interests. Here we have in this statement Dewey's notion of democracy and the features of democracy which lend itself to the all-around growth of the individual. And these features are that there are varied shared interests. That is, there's a diversity of shared interests. There's also diverse association. There are many different points of contact between many different kinds of people. There is, in other words, pluralism in the environment, both in terms of interests and in terms of association, and that there is free and equitable social intercourse in the environment. That is, the environment has opportunities for communication, wide and diverse kinds of communication, wide and diverse kinds of association, and numerous opportunities for participation. An environment that is communicative, associative, and participatory for Dewey is a democratic environment. It is a way of life, of associated living, of conjoined communicative experience. And it is this kind of environment which is educational, which is educative. An educative environment is one that's communicative, associative, and participatory. Therefore, the teacher, pedagogically, must design a democratic environment, an environment that is communicative, associative, and participatory in order for the child to develop. The child will develop in this rich environment, this rich democratic environment, and that environment is most conducive to growth. The method, the more specific method, the method of psychologizing the curriculum, the pedagogical approach that Dewey suggests, along with the democratizing of the classroom environment, is a pedagogical method that is student-centered. It's project-oriented, it's inquiry-based, experiential, and experimental. These features of these elements of the method are features of a reflective situation. There's a problem, a felt problem, an interest. Based upon that interest, projects students can engage with the direction of the teacher in various projects centered around their interests, their lived experience, their felt needs. And those projects will involve the collection and analysis of data, the projection and elaboration of ideas, and the experimental application and testing of those ideas. Therefore, the method is inquiry-based. Dewey, in his progressive method, advocates that we engage students in inquiry, in questioning, in experimentation, not in transmission per se, but in an exploration of the world, aided by the disciplines of knowledge. So the psychologizing of the curriculum is mediated by the project method, which is inquiry-based and experimental, grounded, student-centered, grounded in the lived experience of the student. The process of growth and the process of learning, therefore, is one of reflection, of reflective inquiry. Dewey here is advocating a pedagogy of reflective inquiry that's grounded in the lived experience of the student.